Hi there, Escalade owners. Today in our 2020 Cadillac Escalade, we're going to be taking a look at and showing you how to install REDARC's Tow-Pro Liberty trailer brake controller. In addition to the trailer brake controller, we're also going to be using REDARC's custom wiring harness, which is going to allow us to plug our controller in, as well as REDARC's in-dash mount, which gives us a location to more easily integrate the button into our dash. And this is what our brake controller looks like when it's installed. It's just our little switch here. This is everything that we've got for our controls. It's just a tiny little knob on our dash that lets us choose our sensitivity as well as manually apply the brakes. We can make any adjustments we need with this tiny little knob here. So unlike your traditional brake controllers where you've got a big old module located down here on the dash that you're hitting your knee on every time you get in and out, and you're accidentally bumping and changing all your settings and knocking it out of its bracket, you can ignore all that and have a nice small button that integrates seamlessly into your dash, giving you an almost factory-like look to its controller. You do get some outputs with the LED that's located on the switch, so that way you can get some feedback from what your module is doing. And this brake controller is going to be great for trailers with 1 to 2 axles. The module can be mounted just about anywhere you want in your vehicle as long as the cables are long enough to reach it. If you follow along with us, we'll show you how to get it installed now. We'll begin our installation here in the driver's seat of our Escalade. We're going to get our unit mounted up, so we've got that out of the box. This is the unit here, and this is our switch. We'll get these mounted up first. I'll show you real quick one of the upgrades we're going to be doing. This is the switch right here that comes with your kit, and this is the little mounting plate that you'll get for your switch where you'll see it on your dash, this little gray piece. We're going to be omitting this piece and upgrading using REDARC's switch mount. This is just designed to click into dashes, and you can see here it gives us a good mounting spot for our switch, as well as a nice plate here so we can more easily integrate it into our dash. So this is just a little extra upgrade you can get here at eTrailer to help make this the cleanest install possible. So to get these mounted up though, we are going to need to access the back side of some of these panels here. So this panel down below is going to come off. There are 4 bolts that hold it in. There's 2 on bottom and 2 on the side. To access the side ones, there is a panel over here. I like to grab it down here at the bottom because there's kind of already an opening you can get your fingers in underneath. And if you just pull outward on this panel and then just work your hands around the outside, just kind of popping it off as you go. And then we can set this guy to the side where it won't get damaged. Now that we get this cover off, you can see here's the 2 screws located inside underneath our panel. We'll remove those with a T15 Torx socket. The 2 screws located on bottom, you're going to have one just to the left of your OBD connector. We're going to take that one out. And then you'll have one that's just to the right of your hood release. Both of these are going to use a T15 Torx to remove them. And then when we head over here onto the side, if you kind of just follow the seam, wrap it around, there's one here at the top seam, and at the bottom when you wrap it around the side, there's one there at the bottom. Same size Torx bit. Now that you've got all those loose, the panel does just pop off. There's a bunch of pins that hold it in place. You want to go straight towards the rear of the vehicle. I like to kind of start here at the top. Seems like it's usually a little easier because you can get your hand behind the panel there. And we're just going to be dropping it down. We're not going to be taking it all the way off. There's an electrical connector located over here on the far side, on the driver's side here. We'll press in on the release tab to disconnect it. It's just a small little connector. And then here at the bottom we have our hood release cable. We're actually going to leave that connected. It's kind of a pain in the butt to work with. The plastic pins can be kind of brittle. You can slide it out of there if you want. But I've just had a lot of, over the years, these seem to just tend to be brittle or plastic pieces, so sometimes it's best just to leave it alone. Because we really just needed to get to this area anyway. This is where we're going to be mounting up our module back behind this panel and where we're going to be installing our switch. Now I just want to give you a disclaimer, whenever you're working behind the dash here, any of these support beams, these metal support beams, they're often pretty precision cut when they're cut, and they're not usually gone over with any kind of sandpaper or anything to smooth them off. So expect there to be a lot of sharp edges back there. So you might want to wear some gloves. Just pay close attention to what you're doing. So we're going to go ahead and mount our module. We're just going to use some zip ties to do it. You see, you can run them through here and then you can wrap around to close them back together. These zip ties here aren't going to be quite long enough to be able to do the job by themselves. So often what you can do is just take 2 zip ties, attach them together here. And now we've got plenty of length to be able to wrap around a larger piece and still get around to fully attach it. We're going to be attaching it to the flat spot here on top of our ductwork for our HVAC system. There's a nice flat spot on top that will allow us to easily mount our module to. Give it a good place to sit. What's cool about the REDARC here is that we can mount this in pretty much any orientation that we want. So we're just going to get it set into place. Run our zip tie over to the other side. We'll go through the slot in the REDARC module. And then we'll attach it to the zip tie and secure it down. There's another set of slots there, so we're going to do this again in the other hole to ensure that the module stays in place and it can't move around on us. And there we go, we've got our module nice and secure. It's not going to go anywhere. We can trim off the excess on our zip ties, and then we'll move on to getting our switch mounted. You have to choose the area where you want it and make sure that there's plenty of room behind it. The switch here is pretty deep. You can see how long it is. This has to stick back behind the dash. And then it has that length, plus you still have to plug in a wire behind it as well. The wire does have one end that's at a 90 degree and the other one that's straight, so you get a couple of options for length there on how far it does stick out. A little shorter with the 90 degree side. But you're talking probably about 2 inches worth of depth that you need to account for on the back side. So we want to make sure we got plenty of room back here to be able to put that on our driver's side here, just to the left of our entertainment center. There's a nice flat area here with a pretty deep opening here that we should have plenty of room to get our switch mounted up. I can feel the back side of this panel and push on it, and I can see that I'm moving it, so we know we've got plenty of opening in this area. You will get a diagram with your switch mount if you chose to go with this option. You can use that diagram. The diagram is a little hard to use if you're in a really tight spot here. Like, we're not going to be able to lay it out and drill it because it's not going to tape flat because it's larger than the area that we're working with. But what you can do, and I'll show you the trick here, is that the hole that this is going to fit in needs to be 1 inch in diameter. But if you look, there's a little alignment peg here at the top. That little alignment peg needs to have a hole drilled out for it as well, for this switch to sit in and align the way it's intended to. So we'll use our hole saw to get that 1 inch hole cut, but before we cut all the way through, we'll just score it with our hole saw, and that way we can use the outer perimeter of our hole saw to know where to put that alignment peg hole. So we're going to start. We have a 5/32 drill bit on here. This is the size I like to use to get started, and also the size we're going to use for our alignment peg. I'm reaching here on the back side, feeling around in that area for the opening that is roughly where I want it to go. We're going to go up just a little bit to make sure we've got clearance for the bottom of our switch mount plate, and then we're going to just drill right on through. Now, if you have your template, you can mark out where that alignment peg goes if you're using the template. If the template's not going to work for you, if you're in a tight situation like we are here, we're then going to switch over to our hole saw. We're going to drill out that alignment hole, and we're just going to run this in. Once you get it run in and the hole saw kisses it, I like to turn it into the reverse direction because this is plastic. It'll still cut in reverse, but you actually get a cleaner cut. And now we're just looking to score it all the way around to where we've got a mark. We're not looking to cut through it all the way just yet, just like that. So now we can see that outer perimeter there, and that's where we need to have our alignment peg lined up right with that outer perimeter. So we're going to switch back to our 5/32 drill bit now. And at the very center in the top, where we've made that mark, is where we're going to drill our hole. We want it to be just right on the outside edge of that mark we just made with our hole saw. And we'll drill it out right there. And now we'll continue cutting out that area with our hole saw. And there we go, we got that cut out. You may need to take your other little drill bit and clean up the little alignment peg a little bit, just because the plastic does tend to kind of almost heat up and melt and kind of fill that area back in on you. So we're just going to hit it real fast, just like that, clean it out. Make sure that the notch is still there and we can easily access it. Looks like we are all good to go there. So here we have our switch. We're going to assemble it onto the mounting bracket. So we're going to be omitting that part. This is going to replace that. First we'll take our switch. We're going to slide it in. The alignment peg there at the top lines up with the little light here. You can see there where it pokes through. On the other side, we're going to take our nut and we're going to thread it in. The hex side should be facing outwards, with the sleeve side going in to thread on to our switch. That's just going to snug on there. We don't need to go crazy with it. It's just plastic, so don't want to press too hard. We'll then take our knob here. We're going to turn the knob all the way counterclockwise. That's going to be the 0 position. So we're going to take our switch, put the 0 up at the top, line that up with our light, and the switch just pushes on. So now we should have 0 fully counterclockwise and 10 fully clockwise facing up at the top. So now that we're pre-assembled, we'll need to take the wiring that comes in our kit. Shows you the one that had the 90° and the straight. We're going to route that back behind our paneling. We're going to bring out the end that we want to plug into our switch. I wanted to use the 90° side on this side. We'll then plug it into our switch. Make sure we've got our nameplate facing upright. Feed our wiring back down in there, and then just push our switch into place until it clicks in. Also included with your mounting bracket for your switch, the additional one that we're using here, you'll get some rubber pads here, and they're just top and bottom pieces. And these are for adjusting the switch for curvatures that might be present on the paneling where you're mounting our switch. We chose this panel here, which is nice and flat and straight. So ours mounts flush against it without us having to do any additional work. But if there was a curvature to it, which so many parts of the vehicle here have curvatures, it can be hard to find a spot that's actually flat like that to mount it to. You can take up the gap at the top and the bottom that's going to be present due to that curvature since our switch is straight. So you could stick this on there as well, so that way you get a nice look, even though you're putting it on a curved part of the dash. We then routed the rest of the Ethernet cable that we plugged into the switch here down over to the module that we had mounted up down here and plugged it into the small port on the module. On the other side of our module, we're going to have a large port, and that's for the connection that we'll need to connect to our vehicle to get all the appropriate signals that's going to make this work. You'll have 4 wires that we'll need to make our brake controller operate. Now this harness here doesn't come included with the brake controller. You will need to buy this separately. This here is a custom made harness that is designed for these GM vehicles here, especially for our Escalade. The large 4-blade straight connector here plugs right into our REDARC module, and the 4-pin square connector over here will plug directly into our Escalade. The 4 wires that we've got off here, you'll see, is red, blue, black, and white. The black wire is the power wire that powers our controller up, our module up for our brake controller. The white wire is the ground wire, so we've got power and ground there to power it up. And then you've got your red and your blue wires here. The red wire is your brake signal wire. This is going to be coming from the vehicle, so whenever you press the brakes, it sends it down this wire to our controller so the controller knows that you've pressed the brake in the vehicle. The blue wire is our output wire that goes to the trailer to apply the brakes. So once the red wire sends a signal in, the module will determine how much braking power is needed based on its proportional algorithm, and then it'll send it out the blue wire, down this connector, back to the trailer. So let's go ahead and get this plugged up. It's extremely easy. We're first going to plug it into our module, since this is easier to get to. So we've got our four flat end here. This just plugs into the module. Just line it up and plug it in. And then the other end we're going to route over to the fuse box here, but it's a little easier to get to if we put this panel back up and get it out of our way. So I'm just tucking the wire behind it, and then we're just going to take this panel and just push the pins back in. We don't need to put the screws back in now. So all these little pins, they're going to line up with all these little slits located around. And then don't forget to plug your little electrical connector in right here. Can be a little tricky getting it to line up just due to its odd shape. But it will just pop back in. And now that guy's back out of our way, we can easily access the fuse box cover down here. And that's going to be this large black box located right here. We'll need to get the cover off. You'll see these little lock with the little unlock symbol. Those are pointing to all the clips that hold it on. The one that I found is the most important one is the one furthest towards the driver's side. If we push in on this large tab, we can then take the cover and push it over towards the passenger side. Once you get that side released, it's a lot easier than just come over to this side and pop the tabs off of there. So once you press the tab and push it over, you need to release the tabs on this side. They're extremely tight on the Escalade, so you probably want to use a screwdriver to help you pop these guys off. There we go. Once you get them both popped off, it'll then just pull straight down. It's a very just tight fitting cover there. So now we got it out of the way, we can take our connector here, and it actually just plugs in right there. There's a large open connector here and then a small square connector there. If you take your connector, put the release tab right here facing towards the outside of the vehicle like that, it'll just plug in. Push it until it clicks in, and that should power up our module. And to verify that it is powered up, we've got everything connected, we're going to go ahead and just press the button, and you'll see there that it lights up blue. So now that we've got it to this point, we just need to clean up any of our wiring, zip tie anything up that's loose, and reinstall our panels in reverse order of how we removed them. We'll then need to go for a test drive because the REDARC unit here, since we can mount it wherever we want, the unit needs to know its positioning, because you can mount it like this, you can mount it 180 degrees from that, you can have it upside down, flipped over. There's just all kinds of different ways, and it just needs to know how it's positioned in there to properly work. So the drive cycle is going to help it learn that position, because we've got it secured in a specific way. And when we drive around, it's able to kind of figure out, hey, this is how I'm moving, I must be mounted like this. We've got all of our panels back in now, so we're going to get ready to go out and drive it. Did want to point out the fuse cover. When we put that one back on, you might be wondering, hey, what about the wire? How did you get it to go out the cover? The top of that fuse cover is completely open, so you don't have to make any modifications to that cover when putting it on. Just take the wire that plugged in and just route it straight up. And again, the whole top is open, so that way it'll just hang out the top. We need to go for a test drive now to get it to calibrate. You'll know that it needs to be calibrated if the light is blue and green, flashing back and forth between the two. Then that's probably what you're going to see. That's how it should be out of the box when you plug it in. When we go to drive it, we're just going to be getting up to about 15 miles an hour and then hitting the brakes, and that's going to help it learn its position. And as you're going through that procedure, it can take up to 20, 25 stops sometimes for this to calibrate. The light flashing there will get a little bit faster as it gets closer and closer and closer to calibration. I did also plug in one of our trailer testers in the back, because without having a trailer plugged in, you're not going to get this feedback here, so it can be harder to tell whether or not you finished your calibration without a trailer plugged in. It will still calibrate without a trailer plugged in, but you're not going to get that flashing light kind of showing you whether or not it's done calibrating. So we're just going to go ahead and now just drive it and do like we were talking about, get it up to about 10-15 and then hit the brakes and then just repeat this over and over. And it uses that inertia to be able to determine its position. You do want to be going straight, so I'm turning here. We're not going to hit the brake while we're turning. We're trying to do straight path, starting and stopping, to let the controller know its position. And yeah, we'll just keep on doing this. We'll take a quick break here in a second just to see what the indicator, how it's flashing. So I'm going to put it back into park. And you can see now it's mostly blue and just slightly green flashing. So you can see how it's kind of switched over to the way that it was flashing before. We're getting pretty close to being programmed. So I'm just going to keep on this procedure until it does stay a solid blue. So we did about 3 more stops and I went ahead and put it back into park. And if we look, it's now a solid blue, which means we've completed our calibration. At this point, we're ready to hook up our trailer and hit the road. When it's blue like that, it means we're in proportional mode. Our knob here does let us choose our settings, 0 being the lowest amount of output to the trailer brakes, and as oftentimes is absolutely 0, and 10 being the maximum. And we can see that here, if we press the brake, you can see that the indicator will get more and more red the higher the output it sends back to the trailer, and more blue. Now, since this is proportional, even though I still have my foot on the brake, it did let off on its output because it knows that we're not moving and that we don't need the brakes. You can also manually apply the brakes by pressing in on the button, and you can see that there, and that's going to be proportional to the setting that you have here on the switch. You see I push it in and it manually applies it, but it's kind of like a light blue purpley color. But if we go up to closer to 8, it's a very red color. Again, down here 0 is nothing. And that completes our installation of REDARC's Tow-Pro Liberty on our 2020 Cadillac Escalade.